Thank you all for joining. Just a quick recap on today's agenda. The idea is to share with you the main findings of our latest report on the state of the European food tech ecosystem, and to also use the opportunity to have a discussion about the overall health of the global agri-food tech ecosystem, and we'll share with you our latest Q1 data. And obviously also to take the time to answer your questions. So I think that you have a Q&A tool accessible in the
Yes.
Zoom control panel. Yeah, I was looking for it. It's here. So you can directly ask questions during the presentation and we'll answer afterwards. So normally we'll have about 25-30 minutes of presentation, and we'll take 15-20 minutes of question afterwards. A few words about ourselves. Maybe Jérémie, you can start.
Yeah. First, thank you everyone for being there. So yeah, we are Jérémie and Matthieu, co-founder of DigitalFoodLab. So we have a background of entrepreneurs and food tech expert. And today with DigitalFoodLab, we are doing consultancy.
Yeah. So we've been working for quite some time together to give you an idea about what we do. We mostly work on two types of mission, one which we call exploration, one stream of mission which we call exploration, where the idea is to help our clients to discover what they should be looking at or to deep dive specific topics. And second stream, which we call strategy, basically what do you do or what should you do about all this information. We work on the agri-food tech ecosystem, quite obviously, all along the chain, and with often a global approach, because when you look at any space, it's interesting to know what's happening in your country, but also on the continent and globally, because innovation inside startups, large companies, research, and potential limitation or conditions posed by regulation or government support are very much something global. So that's often our playing ground. So that's enough about us, and we'll move to the core topic about the food tech innovation ecosystem. But first, what I would like to do is to take some time to have a discussion about the state of the food tech ecosystem, and even about the what is food tech itself and why we're talking about it. So just as a reminder, I'm pretty sure that a lot of you already know this information, but I think it can be quite relevant for all the others that are maybe new to food tech. So what is food tech? Food tech is pretty much the overall innovation ecosystem in and startup innovation ecosystem in food. So the gathering of all the entrepreneurs that are doing innovation all along the food supply chain, from agriculture to food science, new food products, food service, hospitality, etc., etc. The question is often, why do we talk about food tech? Why is this ecosystem relevant? So first, let's rewind a bit. Innovation in food has been quite important for the past 50-60 years. We've had amazing results using innovation, such as the famous Green Revolution, which has almost eliminated deaths related to famine globally. So our current food system has achieved very meaningful goals. But in the meantime, it has also created very meaningful challenges also. So what you can see on the left side is the number of deaths related to diet, which is in the millions each year. So our current food system is not quite bad for our health, at least in what we eat currently, and also it has serious damaging economic consequences, which are estimated I know it's a bit generous in terms of estimation, but or it's meant to be shocking, at about 12 to 13 billion or trillions, even it's we're not even talking about billion, but trillions of dollars of impact caused by our unhealthy diets, by the fact that we are damaging land, and that will have impact on the short and medium and long term. And what is kind of bad is that the consequences are only getting worse just because first people are looking globally at eating more and more like we do in the West. So eating more meat, eating more cocoa, etc., which are products with damaging impact. And we are starting to see more and more shocks related to climate or other events, such as stratospheric rise of the prices of cocoa. So basically, there are these four big pillars of change, which are climate change, the impact of food on climate, the impact of climate on food, the fact that population is aging globally, the problem related to health and food, and mostly are the impact of health on food, and on food on health, sorry, and also the very big challenge for the food value chain of value distribution, where we see more and more value going towards private label brands and ingredient manufacturers, which is amazing for them, but less so for CPG brands and other manufacturers. And you have that on the side, which are the challenges, but also on the right side, you have a lot of technologies which are not coming from food and which get application into food, and which are basically constituting the food tech ecosystem. And that's a combination of both challenge and potential solution, which are creating this future of food, which we call digital food, quite obviously, and where we see the innovation ecosystem providing the solutions to create our future food ecosystem. So that was the intro. Basically, the why we here and why we're talking about food tech, which I often think is quite relevant because we can get lost in all the discussion about investment startups and things like that. So then let's move to the core topic, which is about the food tech ecosystem and the state of the European food tech ecosystem. So as you can see on the screen, what you have is the yearly investment in euros that you have in the European food tech startup ecosystem. So pretty much 3 to 4 phases. The first one, when FoodTech emerged, for 6 years, slow rise of investment. Or now it looks slow compared to then the very fast increase during 21-22, when in tech, in food tech specifically, investment skyrocketed, even more in Europe due to huge investment in delivery startups. And then a decrease of about 60% of funding in 23, in almost 2 years. And now in 24, we had a stabilization. So we have this plateau of funding, which is at about 4 billion. So bad thing, it's less than it was in 21, but good thing, it's much higher than it was pre-COVID, which is good compared to the rest of the world. Globally, funding, and we'll see that later, have just reached levels of 2015. So what we often say is that Europe has a smaller share of, or larger share of a smaller pie. So let's say we need to find positive in this bad environment. Unfortunately, what we are measuring in Q1 25 is another decrease, kind of steep, almost 50% decrease in Q1 25. So that kind of bad. That's something that we measure also globally. We'll come back to that later on our global update. But it also shows that, and I don't really need to point to the reason that investors are quite uncertain about the future right now and are putting in pause a lot of investments. But again, quite logical. we are not sure about where the situation is going, where tariffs are going. So you can be sure that food companies have other priorities right now than innovation. And if they have other priorities than innovation, maybe investors are not investing into startups that could be acquired by these companies in the near or medium future. As I've said, now Europe, at least in 24, represented about 28% of the global food tech ecosystem. Again, that's kind of good because when we started these reports on the European food tech ecosystem in 2014, we were about less than 8%. We rose to 12, 15% in 2020 and rose quite a lot during COVID and post-COVID. So now Europe is a hub, a food tech hub. It's not on par with the US, but it's still a very important place to look for innovation globally. Let's say it's a hub in comparison of the same importance of what's happening in Asia. So it's very, very positive. I can't stress on that enough, and how pleased also we are to see that. But then when we talk about Europe, it's also a bit more the combination of different ecosystems, different countries with different evolutions. If we look at the evolution in the different European markets, what you can see is very different positive or negative results. Europe is faring quite okay, but that's not the case of different countries. Germany, number one, with almost 1 billion invested, plus 42%. UK, France doing quite poorly compared to 23, and other countries, Netherlands doing quite good, and Finland, due to a couple of large investments, reaching this podium or this with this fifth place. And if we look a bit more at the data itself, you can look at the different ecosystems with more than 100 million invested in 24. And we had in total 12 countries where more than 100 million was invested. So 12 countries with a sizable food tech ecosystem. It can vary a lot because if we take the example of Czech Republic, it's pretty much one startup raising or not fund. We can see it on the graph. They raised in 22, they didn't raise in 23, and the startup, which is a delivery startup, raised again in 24. But otherwise, you have mostly a balanced ecosystem with diverse amount of startups. So again, here the positive news is we have interesting things happening in many different areas in Europe. Our leading areas of interest would be first Germany, UK, France as leaders, the Nordics as a whole, which are very exciting, a lot of innovation happening there in Denmark, Sweden, Finland, a bit in Norway, so very interesting things happening there, a bit in Spain, and then rest of Europe where also the Netherlands, which I shouldn't forget, and then the rest of Europe where it's a bit less exciting and ecosystem can be a bit smaller in some areas and quite absent in many other places in Europe. So again, if we want to see it positively, a lot of potential for these areas to develop agri-food tech ecosystems and a bit more focused on innovation. Again, what we've talked about is pretty much food tech as a whole, but as you've seen in the intro, food tech can be split in 6 categories, and investments are not faring pretty much the same in these categories. What you have in green is agtech, so investment in future of agriculture. In blue is food science, which is both alt proteins and CPG brands. And in orange, you have investments in delivery startups. So as you can see, if we exclude delivery, the ecosystem is not doing so bad compared to the rest of tech, notably. So it's pretty much delivery, which was hit the most, at least until 23. In 24, we saw again a rise of delivery and a small decrease in other areas. But we'll have a look a bit more at these categories. One of the most tracking points of the report, when we looked at the number of deals in each subcategory. So we have these 6 categories. We have about 30 subcategories, which help us to systemize and sort the different investments. And what we were quite surprised to see is the organization of these top categories, that in terms of new deals, that alt proteins, CPG brands, functional ingredients, ag biotech were in the largest number of deals. So that means there is still an appetite when you see this number of investors to bet on alternative proteins, on ag biotech, on CPG brands in Europe. So very interesting, because that also shows that it's not only deals in large startups, but also small ones. So that's kind of good to see that investors are investing more and more into long-term technology-driven innovation in Europe, which was very much not the case 4 or 5 years ago. Then if we take time to look at the most important categories and see what's happening. So first in agtech, so all the innovation in agriculture. So basically startups which are either working on making the already existing farm smarter, or just or building the farm of the future through sustainable farming, really indoor farming, reducing the amount of emissions, robotics, etc., etc. What we see is a decrease in funding, quite noticeable, a bit more than 30%, but also very interesting is a rise of one category, which is novel farms. So we had a lot of funding previously in indoor farming that has almost vanished, but as it has been replaced, as shown by the picture, by aquaculture. So in a year or two, we've seen huge rise in the amount invested in aquaculture, specifically on land aquaculture. So very specific, very European, very interesting also because, as I said, we see also a lot of deal in alt proteins, but in the same time, a lot of investments in aquaculture, which is an answer to all the challenges around protein in the world. Second area, which is delivery, where we obviously see a lot of variation, quite huge level of funding in 2021 around quick commerce, which is here in gray, which has now almost disappeared from this graph, and still some funding for new retailers. So notably startup, if you know, like Picnic in the Netherlands, so which are building online retailers quite fast and with a lot of money. Big space and very interesting to look at, which is food science. So the combination of 2 different categories, which are CPG brands, new beverages, new food products, pet food, so short-term innovation, and long-term innovation on alternative proteins and new ingredients. And here, what is the most interesting is first, almost no decrease. We remain at very high level, almost the levels of peak COVID. So that's quite interesting to see that this is happening in Europe, whereas in the rest of the world, we observe a decrease in these categories. And even more, if we look at just alternative proteins and functional ingredients, basically alt proteins are new brands or players trying to focus on the developments of new proteins, like through precision fermentation, cellular agriculture, and functional ingredients are startups working on new sugars, new fats, new oils that could be used potentially in alternative proteins tomorrow or other products. And here we see a rise, which is also very surprising because globally, the amount of funding going into these categories is very much decreasing. Now, in our estimation, Europe is now accounting for about 50% of global alt protein functional ingredients investment globally. So that's very noticeable because Europe started, as you can see on the graph on the left, from somewhere 5%, and now we may have the biggest ecosystem globally. So I can again not stress enough how first cool it is that we've succeeded to develop that, even in the context of complicated regulation, lack of appetite from consumers, etc. And then we have a thriving ecosystem, which is emboldened by large European companies using these startups abroad, but also large companies. We see more and more deals with Chinese, Korean, Japanese companies investing and partnering with European startups here. Finally, a space which we don't comment a lot on, which is consumer tech, with one category or two categories which we like a lot, which are nutrigenomics and recommendations. It's a small ecosystem, not a lot of funding. You see here we are talking about tens or hundreds of millions, whereas we were talking in billions in the other areas. But we see the emergence of very cool European ecosystem on personalization, healthy aging through digitization. We see startups from Europe going into the US, in Asia with their products, and which apparently have the best science. So again, an area to be quite happy about. Finally, less positive news. I don't see any way to put that on positive light, so I will not try it. Is when we look at the distribution of investment by maturity. So blue is 22, light blue 23, and orange 24. Basically, what you can see is a continuous decrease in early stage funding. And why did we have and did we observe almost stabilization in the overall amount of funding? Is because more money was going and went to large startups. So investors have a flight to quality mode. They are going to startups that have proven business models and are investing less and less in early stage. And this is not super visible at a macro level, but yeah, it means basically that there is less and less innovation getting funded, and there is no way it can be super positive. So we still see cool stuff getting funded, but there is a challenge to fund more early or super early stage startup. In our analysis, this is caused notably by, let's say, the following point, which is a lack of acquisitions. If you don't see acquisition down the line, maybe you are less keen to invest in early stage startups. So if we look at the noticeable acquisition of 2024, that was not a lot, and that was not a lot of money invested. You had, for example, this French food supplement brand acquired by private equity. You had some acquisition noticeable like Deliciously Illa by Hero, but again, mostly brands. So on the verge of the food tech ecosystem. So yeah, complicated scope when you look at acquisition. And there is indeed a need to see more of them if we want to solve the problem of creating more and more innovation. So what should be the key takeaways? First, investments were stable. So at macro level, it's positive in a context which remains complicated. Europe, again, as I said, is doing extremely well in what we call the future food segments. So alt proteins, bio inputs for agriculture, regenerative agriculture financing. Most of the leaders now are in Europe, so very, very positive. In other areas, Europe is still lagging behind, notably due to regulatory constraints. Even in the categories that I've mentioned, research HQ is in Europe, but where is the proof of concept getting done? Where are the products getting commercialized in the US or in Asia? And that's, we can't be satisfied with that. So there is a regulatory problem and challenge in Europe. Also positive news, a difference between 24 and previous years. We see more and more non-European companies and even Asian companies investing into Europe, partnering with European startups. So that's very positive. And final message, number of acquisition is too limited to be sustainable or to make this ecosystem sustainable. So at the end of the day, we need to see more acquisitions. As I said, what I wanted is to do a quick opening on the global food tech ecosystem and to give some perspectives. If we look at the data for Q1 2025 at a global level, that's not super positive. Investments are decreasing again. In our opinion, is due to the current economic uncertainties, the possibility of a return of inflation. But yeah, it's hard to make any projection and prediction. But we, as everybody else, shall wait to see if this is just a blip or if it's indicative of further decline in investment. And if we look at where this money was invested, we don't have a lot of surprises. It pretty much looks like normal, with one exception is that we saw more funding for the US. So apparently, this current decrease is doing more damages in the European Asian ecosystem than in the American one. So yeah, if we look at the challenges for the agri-food-tech ecosystem, they are the contextual challenges, tariffs, economic uncertainties, lack of appetite for investments in food tech. There are structural challenges like exit problem. Why don't we have more exits in food tech? And there are attractiveness issues, notably linked to the previous one. If you don't have exits, you won't have that many entrepreneurs venturing into that space. So most of these problems can be solved, but it will take a bit of time. And we still expect to bounce back in terms of funding in the short to medium term. But we can't really know if it will be enough. As I go back to the introduction about all the challenges that we need to solve to create the food of the future. There is a strong need for food tech, and if we want to have all the required solutions, it will also requires a lot more funding. And again, thank you for your time and the interest on that. If you have any question, you should ask them in the Q&A tool. And just in the meantime, to leave you a minute to ask your question, I'll just tell you a bit more about what we do at DigitalFoodLab. So with 4 examples of work that we commonly do, so which are often successive work. We do a lot of workshops and presentations, which are often an introduction about what's happening on space. You have a good, let's say, intro about what we can do through a webinar form, but we do a lot of this. We help a lot of our clients through their innovation strategy, where the idea is first to define either at a business level or at a business unit level what you should look at. So basically develop your own innovation curve, your own innovation radar. What are the area, the technologies, the innovation ecosystem that you should put in your radar, then define where to play. So which of these areas you should prioritize, and then how to leverage them, and finally activate through the right partnerships, acquisitions, or investments. Can be also directly deep dives. In many instances, you know what are the spaces that you want to explore. For example, we completed something on sweet proteins, so to look at what was happening in the space, what were the different technologies, and how our client could leverage these different technologies for its benefits. And finally, we work with many clients on bespoke, 100% personalized food tech watch, where the idea is to bring to you each month what you need to know about the agri-food tech ecosystem for the innovation team, but also through presentation for broader audiences and through executive briefs for the top management. So let us know if any of these, obviously, areas can be relevant to you, and now we can maybe switch to the Q&A part.
Sorry. Yes, thank you, Matthieu, for this presentation. So we received some questions, but first I want to remind you that for those that missed the beginning of this presentation, you can have access of all this data in our report, which is available for free on our website. So do not hesitate to download it. And also we will share this the recording of this webinar soon after it. So maybe a quick question to start about investors. Did you see a shift in type of investors in their about their origin? Are they more from Europe, from the US, or elsewhere in the last years?
Yep.
Investors that invest, of course, in the European food tech. I mean,
yeah. What we saw compared, if we look at this history of food tech, before 2020, we had not a lot of foreign investors in Europe, or at least when Europe is maybe too big a word. We had foreign investors in the UK, a bit in Germany since 2016, something like that, and a bit in the Nordics. But since 2020, we see non-European investors, mostly American investors, in the whole of Europe, mostly France, UK, Netherlands, but even Czech Republic, the eastern part of Europe, Finland, pretty much everywhere. Let's say since 2022, we saw a decrease in the amount of funding from foreign investors or non-European investors. And what we see, but that's not directly money or not quantitatively a lot of money, investors outside of Europe coming back, notably corporates, but that's not a lot of money, at least for now.
Okay, thank you. And so more important question. A lot of people are asking about alternative protein. So you said that today Europe is one of the leading hub in this space. It represents about 50% of the global funding. So I have a question about what is included in alternative proteins. So are we talking about new ingredients and as well as consumer products? And also, do we see inside this category an evolution? I mean, what in terms of technologies, what are investors betting on? It's more, I don't know, the precision fermentation or just new CPG brands, etc. Can you tell us more about this ecosystem in particular?
Yeah. If you go back to the data that I shared and that we published on the report, so when we talk about alternative proteins, is two things. So in the deep blue, we have actually two categories. Indeed, the brands, the CPG brand like Eura, La Vie, This in the UK, etc., and players that are using new technologies like cellular agriculture, precision fermentation, biomass fermentation, molecular farming, even if it's not really a thing in Europe, to create proteins, alternative proteins to mostly meat and dairy. So that's basically we are gathering startups by their goal. So their goal at the end of the day is to propose a product that will be an alternative to animal protein. And functional ingredients is basically all the startups which are using the same technology, which can be leveraging plants, biomass fermentation, precision fermentation, etc., to create ingredients that will be included in products, which could be alt proteins, but which could be very different. So like I don't know, new fats, new oils, new sugars, which I was talking about, etc., etc. So we separate it that way, just to have a view. But indeed, it includes brands and techs. So it's a bit of a mix, and it is. I don't have precise data on the separation in terms of technology, but just to give you a hint, if you look at the light blue, so the functional ingredients, which is mostly more advanced technologies like precision fermentation and a bit of biomass and a lot of cellular agriculture, you can see a rise there. So there is a growing appetite for these advanced technologies, and indeed there is a declining appetite for brands, where we see a bit less money, but mostly much less deals. So much less new startups getting funded, even if we still see significant investments in large companies. For instance, La Vie, a French startup, raised 25 million last year. Eura raised a bit of money, etc. So we still see significant amount of money in brands, but in a small amount of brands.
Yeah, thank you. And so some functional ingredients today are here to help food companies create more healthier products. And so I want to ask you a question about food as medicine. Is it a significant trend today in Europe?
It's complicated. Let's say if we judge food as medicine and healthy aging as a whole as something that people are talking about, or as something that large companies are talking about, yeah, it's a huge trend. If we look at it as something where you have investments and new startups, etc., no, it's not yet something, because I think we don't yet have a collective definition of what is food as medicine. And if we use the most commonly used, or at least what we think are the right definition, so either new ingredients, healthy aging ingredients. Here we have mostly functional ingredients. So yeah, we see a rise in alt sugars, alt dairy proteins used for functionalities, HMOs, etc., but it remains small. And if we use the digital part, where you will use test new captors, glucose monitoring, it exists, but it remains super, super small. So Europe is not, it's well positioned, again, because I think it's a well question, but in a small ecosystem yet.
Indeed. Thank you. Maybe a word about quick commerce. Is there still quick commerce companies in Europe?
There is one, which is better than zero. Basically, quick commerce in Europe equals Flink in Germany. Which is funny. I don't know if you have any idea or not. I've not looked enough into the case to better understand why they survived, whereas all the others didn't. Maybe it's because they were less geographically expanded when the reversal of funding happened in 2022, and they had a better time scaling down to focus on their core market, Germany. I don't know, but that would be a really good case to understand why this industry has disappeared. In my opinion, it's a shame that quick commerce disappeared. I really feel like there is still a market for it. It just a category of startups that received too much money too fast, grow too fast, and then investor retracted. But I still feel that there is a market for it.
A question about aquaculture. We talk about it in the report. Can you have a basic word on it?
Yeah. Basically, when we gathered all the data for this report, what we saw was 4 or 5 very large deals in aquaculture, mostly in Iceland, Finland, maybe Sweden
Norway.
and Spain. Yeah, Norway, obviously. Yeah. And we're quite surprised because normally we have these kind of deals, but they are quite limited. And then we saw this large yield, which were not investment in very large existing companies, but very much in new ventures, bringing either an innovation on the market, etc. So indeed, that's a space where we see a growing appetite. I think it's quite logical. We have this discussion about sustainability, which is obviously growing and growing, which has now extended to a discussion about sustainable fishing, which is a very big challenge. And it's kind of obvious consumers are switching their habit from red meat to white meat and fish. So fish consumption is rising. In the meantime, Europeans are saying, oh, we want to be able to grow our own food. So it's quite logical. And also, if you look at the data about startups doing plant-based alt seafood, let's say it's not doing super well. So the only alternative to fishing is aquaculture. So that explains why we see this rise in funding.
Thank you. Maybe to conclude, if you have one trend that you think is the most interesting to follow in the following months in Europe, which one
Yeah,
would you choose?
I'm not good at choosing, but
you can choose several.
no, I'll do one. I think I choose two. Okay. First one, which is quite obvious, it's about alt cocoa and coffee. These startups like in the US, California Cultured, Food Brewer in Switzerland, and all the other, which are very cool in Europe, doing alternatives to cocoa and coffee through cellular agriculture, but also Planet A, win-win with plant-based. I really like this space because these startups are answering a real challenge, which will only get worse. We have less resources, and there is a need for this product. So I can't wait to see more products on the market, and I really feel like it could be the way for cellular agriculture and precision fermentation to enter the market more massively. So that's why I would choose that. And second one, which is bigger, which is healthy aging and food as medicine, which we discussed. I think the discussion is still ongoing, but we see the impact of inflation, of GLP-1, making consumer consume less. And so there is a need for very big companies to define where they want to play in the future. And most of them are looking at added value products, which often mean healthy benefit or product with healthy benefits. And I find that fascinating. It connects with digitization. How do you help the consumer along its journey every day with advice, etc., recommendations? So that's a space where we see a lot of startups operating in Europe, which could help through with ingredients, with products, and with all this part of building platforms to help consumers all along the journey related to food, health, sports, etc.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthieu. Thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. As I said earlier, you can download for free the report on our website. And also do not hesitate to subscribe to our newsletter to have FoodTech insights each week in your mailbox. And we will share the recording of this webinar in the following days. So thank you all. Thank you, Matthieu, and have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.